There is a lot to go over in this fairly short broadcast. And um, it hopefully, by watching this, it will be easier in the future to demonstrate that the ideas flow from one another and aren't just um, put together from the sort of musicality you find in a fragmented but beautiful poem. There are significant issues that tie all of these ideas together that may seem otherwise jumbled. One of them has to do with the way that I was used as a focal point, a signal nexus in acts of domestic terror. The way that my poetry was played off of, and the way that my mind was um, attacked. What we see when we look at that issue is the substitution of human rights for a doctrine of justified terrorism that comes from the weird branch of sociology you find at UW Dialectical. A man named Donald, who held me hostage, along with the author of Flame Over Africa as a child, was bold enough to tell Three Rivers Arts Festival international terrorism will take the place of human rights. My father was a human rights author with a good deal of credibility working in the public school system. So they went behind his back in what was described in the script that were identified as the Texas school book as a midnight train to Georgia. Why that would be used as a symbol, it's probably because my father had turned down the presidency of the University of Georgia when they refused to desegregate. He didn't brag about it. He mentioned it to me on his deathbed. Well, this put him in a position that was very interesting relative to the men who were following me from the CIA. John Stockwell, for example, was someone who said that he was looking for wise men when he joined the National Security Council. And what he found were basically slackers who were falling asleep, making decisions and giving orders that they knew nothing about, that were killing lots of people overseas. And he was indignant. Well, my father was very different. He was somebody who was experienced in World War II, acquainted personally with Eisenhower, and he just went into public education for his services. He didn't rise to his highest potential in terms of the status quo, but he believed in public service very strongly and made a good impression on a number of people who were his fortunate students, fortunate enough to appreciate him as a teacher. And what they did was they grabbed me because he wasn't watching me to embarrass him and pulled quite a number. And when I was growing up, I had no idea what was going on. So you have complicated ruses of a war college type. And It amounts to a cruel and unusual social experiment. How is it possible that politicians would ignore such incidents going on loudly enough that I have spoken out to them in letters? Well, I don't really know the answer to that, but it looks like we're seeing a panorama of developments that are shockingly related to something that's local and happening globally. Additionally, we're seeing telltale signs of a phenomenally macabre psychology that is at work in the incidents of planning. I suspect, John Stockwell used to also say that his work as a CIA agent had given him a tremendous burden of karma. I think what happened was that the beer bellies of the outposts of the CIA and Texas saloons and George Bush's vanguard of brawlers who were old Klansmen, singing American Pie, um, said, well, I got some karma I'd like to work up. There's some karma from that atom bomb, for example. Why don't we give them a little boy? Ha 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 ha. We'll give them a little boy. They can do anything they want to. It'll be cow hose therapy. They'll chew the carpet. They'll tear up the little boy. That'll be good for my karma and give him a donation, a sacrificial item. Now, I think that's clearly what went on with the way that I was made into an offering, continue to be made into an offering. But despite that fact, there's a number of strange things about it. For example, there's a misinterpretation that goes to the gay lobby of Seattle promoting Elton John's theory of social acceptance regarding the AIDS abomination, which was a purge, a Stalinist type purge, much as COVID is a Stalinist type purge. I'll get to the Ukraine. They call it an Alamo obligation because Paul McCartney wants the little boy donated to the fire. And it's not non-sufficient until he gets cooked, but it won't work for the karma. Well, what they're really talking about is Johnstown KoolAid. Everybody got to drink the Kool-Aid. Oliver Stone's take on the Doors, nobody gets out of here alive. And as sickening as it is, it's the people who authored the program who came up with that. Came up with things like, if you wash, we'll be offended. So they're calling drinking the Kool-Aid, they're calling the Johnstown Massacre an Alamo. And it's as disgraceful as it is. It's institutional on every single level. People talk about relatively loosely the topic of genocide anymore. 1,000 people get killed, it's genocide. It's a huge massacre and it's an atrocity. But what would you care if one person gets killed? See, the problem with discounting the way the Kennedys were systematically eliminated and the way that my mind was tortured and targeted, and my mind was then used as a ricochet unit to take out the Kennedys, is that something very important in attacking the United States of America is at work in this. It's not genocide, it's ideocide. It's the idea that our ideals have to be systematically removed. The basic structure of our conceptualization of human rights and civil rights has to be removed. We're entitled to our sovereignty provided that we go along with the culturally competent ingenuity of people who killed the Kennedys and say they speak for the planet now, and these Stalinist purges that have gone on. So, how do we know what happened and who was responsible for it? There's a good deal at work in that because of the ideological program that's at work. But you can find the trace elements in such things as the roster surrounding the 1986 Rainbow Coalition, Rainbow Gathering in Allegheny National Forest. Naturally, people who are extremists about the environment can harbor eco terrorists. Will Zell on Mount Desert Island, a man I investigated and proved, had prior knowledge of the AIDS attack, but who was never arrested for the incredibly deranged open warfare that he engaged in, was an eco terrorist. Well, there was a boy named Jairus who, when the time that I received the Texas school book, came and told me a very strange story outside the Regent Theater in East Liberty, down by the East End Cooperative Ministry. And although he remembered telling me 14 years later, 15 years later, he reminded me, do you remember that story I told you? Although I remembered him telling me a very complicated and strange story, I didn't remember a single word of it, but it was when the letters came. He goes by Jairus, and when I asked him what does Jairus mean, he said, Jive virus. He was with a girl named Marcia who had touch bars. She was very thin. Sue was around. Stephanie was around, but perhaps most pregnantly, considering Side Street, was Davy Jones and his friend Jocelyn. Jocelyn, of course, Elders was a medical advisor to the government at the time when the Elders Project uh, was underway. So we have these namesakes. Joe Romano, for example, remembers the magazine I put out with interesting pictures featuring M. Christian Robinson's short poem. So, um, what you have is these word games. Like when you look at what they did to me, Herbert Simon, if you played a game on his name, he was a machine intelligence specialist at Carnegie Mellon, you would get Simon Says, which is from um, Underdog, Simon Bar Sinister, what could make people do what Simon says. I will do what Simon says, is what they would say after he got them brainwashed. And now Boris Karloff lived in the Dakota with the perpetrators in New York. So you have Herbert Simon Says, and Karloff, and this neuroplastic brain control agency in which they were working with the people from Flame Over Africa who tortured me and extruding language to misuse. And you have psychological testing of me as a child. Polly Peckham asked me what were the words of the inner light, and I was just guessing what he wanted to hear, throwing out random curse words. As I was looking out of my window or something, is what they said. But Sidney Busis noted that it was impossible to get reliable, pure tone results. And of course, that was a metaphor for the Sacred Daughters movement that they were using to justify all this, with the girl from Neva Pornographic whose better nib had been removed. As Greg Carl puts it, the initial encounter of the X motive is tainted by the shadow of the adversary. Tav used to talk about ritual devirginations. That was what they had in mind, a hollow for Holocaust. And they pursued this sort of thing. For example, Rand Paul and Ron Paul. Ron Paul was the alliance between Ronald Reagan and Paul McCartney. Of course, it jumped down the whole PP. Reagan didn't know Lenin was his sacred buddy. And all is well because we are an alliance. favoring their ideological trumpy tuned sacred penny. Rand, it was Ayn Rand, of course, the patent pending control board making a decision who gets the Rubik's Cube. Go ahead to make a movie about all of this. So you had um, Ron Paul and Rand Paul pretending what was done to Shannon Harps when she was just a bystander, ripper murdered over a penny. In fact, my first glasses were given to me because Penny Creary said I was holding the magazine with the Manson story too close to my eyes. So I obviously need glasses. And then this Penny crowd come along from 1717 Murdoch and say I didn't read between the lines carefully enough in the script from Israel that was supposedly so innocent. So when you hold the truth very important, you realize that Revolution Number Nine and back in the USSR overlap with what Oswald was. He was back in the USSR for a while, and with the revolutionary group run by Oswald Mosley in areas like Liverpool, where the Secret Service of the Confederacy once resided. And they covered for and knew all about Zell and his patron John Archer up in Maine. So what you find is when they poison me in the mouth, they created a sort of Rashomon, meaning a series of different views as to why they did it. They didn't question that they had the right to. I mean, I reported decades ago, it's in the internet record, that Yoko Ono's overdubbers, Wing No Wen, worked on with Disney on The Voice of Mullen, and they were intoning things when I was on this. Had said, I want him diseased. Before they poisoned me in the mouth, they were saying things like, if you wash, we'll be offended. It was this Johnstown KoolAid crowd who were getting a kick selling it as an Alamo. So they were saying, Donald Trump's speechwriter, Azamaz, that was Icons of Vulgarity was his band's name. Bad Martyrs promotion. But Icons of Vulgarity was like free speech is sacred. You can insult anyone. And they use that to extrude as therapy the burst and possession element of the neuroplasm. And in the end, got it to say something unhealthy and unwise to one of their favorites in Seattle, Harvey Goldner, who died of a mouth cancer. That's one of the Rashomon explanations for why they poisoned me in the mouth. It's a whole, nobody questioned that they had the right to, just why they did it. They passed on the microphone. Well, here's why I would think we did it, and here's why I did it. And here's why I did it. One after another, they take turns giving various stage explanations. Now, when it comes to Ukraine, the civil conveyances broadcast the idea of a purge, a Stalinist purge, but they also established the parameter. And if you look at the secret trial that they've used me for, it's very important to them not who I am, but what I represent to them. It's a switch from the human rights to the sociology, the civil rights to the sociology. My name, James McRodland Creary, is conveniently JC, but it's also distinguished in the way Scottish name in the way Paul McCartney is, James McRodland Creary. In fact, the middle word has Wildland in it, like Disneyland. So he's clearly using me for substitution purposes. You want one like me here? Here's some. You will give something that you want for. Get rid of some of our bad karma. It's our mentality. So what they did was, I suspect, I got a autograph Gunsmoke picture from Clint Eastwood. They hark back to the days when Brezhnev was really, really excited to meet Chuck Connors, the rifleman. It's in the historic record. And they teamed up Like when they shot up the Tree of Life, they left the White Rose and killed seriously Kennedy and then murdered some more Kennedys after killing Donnie Chen. It was all the same gang shooting, all of them. And what it was a sort of salvation by symbology. You know, we'll do a little of this, like a brain salad surgeon cutting up little pieces of venture, and your type will get over the hurdle. You don't need to worry that maybe you won't. You know, they got this guy Nav on it. He says for everybody they kill, two more will spring up like skeleton soldiers or something. Yeah. The bottom line is that people have a right to be protected from this abnormal bullshit. These people who promote and put off, you know, they see it as a golden opportunity. They see the ecology movement as a golden opportunity to rape the rainforest. What kind of reasoning is that? It's absurd hypocrisy. Manchin and Sinema sabotaged the Democratic Party ticket. Well, this whole story is about Manchin Sinema, Manchin and Sinema, Man Sinema, and they don't, and they sit right there, right out in the open. Everyone can see it, and then they don't say anything about it. Now, what gives is the Ideocide against JFK. JFK became a politician in large measure because when PT 109, his sailboat was hit by uh, the Japanese, he rescued a man by carrying him on his back at risk to his own life, swam to an island and saved him. The kind of man that will jump in to save another man is not really what Joe Biden is. He's more the type, most of the people in the Democratic Party are you excluded yourself by not being a team player. When somebody gets so despondent with the way things are that they say, oh, the heck with it, instead of hollering, man overboard and coming to help him, they say it's sink or swim, buddy. So, you know, the lack of magnanimity has been part of the problem for a long time. So, vote Joe Manchin out and get somebody more responsible in, because we still have children to protect from these Purge syndications that are apparently a network that has planned all of this behind the scenes across the governments. You know, the VA here in Seattle was priming me with things about Donbass just in time to make critical reviews of Putin's incendiary commentary of a military direction killing innocent people. It's all cahooters. And the issue is a cruel and unusual experiment. It doesn't go beyond that. They're extremely, extraordinarily psychotic when it comes to yours truly. I don't know why. I know who they are. One of them is Peter Gabriel. He's a sad case.